And Mr. Sanjay Bhattacharya joins us. Mr. Bhattacharya is a former Indian ambassador to Egypt, Turkey and Switzerland. Ambassador Bhattacharya, welcome to DD India News Hub. Now, how do you view the campaigns of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump? Anything out of the ordinary that stands out to you?
Well, there are a few unusual things that have happened in the last few weeks. Firstly, of course, Kamala Harris is a relative latecomer into the campaign, but she has picked up momentum very considerably and very fast, and she's narrowed the gap with Trump, who was leading the hustings with Biden initially. The fact that she is the first woman of African and Indian descent, is Jamaican and Indian descent, is also something that is very interesting for the White House and for the people of the United States to contend with. But I think that apart, there are significant things that come out of the initial remarks from both sides. I think in her initial acceptance speech, Kamala Harris, which was a relatively short one, made four things very clear. First, she outlined the very sharp difference between herself and former President Donald Trump. And she was trying to woo certain people, in particular the liberals and the ones who were the fence sitters. The second thing that she made was that she made it very clear that she would be fairly robust on the America First agenda. And in that particular context, she said in specific that it would be America, not China, that would win the 21st century. The third thing, again, which I think Kamala Harris said, which actually appeals to the social sentiments of the people, and her comments on abortion and some of the other issues about middle class was something that was also extremely important for the American people who are looking for a way forward. And the fourth one was the one that pertains particularly to foreign policy. She didn't make too many comments, but she said that she would continue with the support for Ukraine and for Israel, and that she would not hug dictators. Now, this is, of course, an initial kind of a remark, and I think over the days we shall see how this contest pans out. But I must say that Kamala Harris has made a very impressive entry.
Here, I'd like to ask you a related question, Ambassador. What do you make of Facebook owner Mark Zuckerberg's explosive allegations? He admits that the Biden government pressured Facebook to censor COVID-19 content. He also says that it was wrong to suppress a news report on Biden's son. Do you think this damning allegation will harm Kamala Harris's campaign going forward?
To be honest, the rules of governance regarding social media are still somewhat fuzzy. The role that governments should have and corporates should have is still being defined. And of course, we've seen over the last decade or so that there has been increasing pressure on the corporate sector, the ones who actually produce these social media platforms, to be far more responsible. And I think that is happening essentially on three different platforms. The first is a lot of social media content tends to be emotive rather than factual. And therefore, how do you deal with these emotive issues when you have to deal with matters of policy and matters of state? The second is that fact-checking has become an extremely difficult issue. And there are often contestations even amongst the private parties, but particularly when it comes to the governments and when they want to have censorship of certain ideas that are coming forward. And the third, which is actually perhaps the most serious, is that since social media has huge impact on people at large and has the ability to influence voters, let us say, there is always a consciousness that a certain narrative needs to be promoted. Now, sometimes this narrative may be in line with what national security objectives are, but they may be counter to what transparency objectives are, what data privacy issues are, and therefore these dilemmas are not yet worked out, and therefore what Mark had said about the kind of pressure on him to impose censorship of sort is fairly serious. But the world is still undefined in terms of the rule of the law on this.
Indeed, and shifting the focus back to diplomacy, Ambassador, how would you describe India-US relations? Also, what will a Trump or Harris presidency mean for India and the world at large?
I think the congruence of our broader objectives and our perceived roles and collaboration in the future architecture of the globe are now emerging and are becoming fairly clear on a bipartisan basis. And therefore, in a certain sense, we would say that whether it is a Republican government or it's a Democratic government, I think the broad issues of our relationship will continue to go ahead, particularly when we look at the future-oriented partnership, which is about, our development exercise, the security in the neighborhood, and in the broader Indo-Pacific. I think those kinds of collaboration would continue as they have. We, of course, have had the experience of working with Donald Trump in the past, and it had been a very productive period for India-US relationship. I have no doubt that if Mr. Trump wins, that kind of collaboration would expand further. At the same time, I think we have very good understanding with the Democrats, but I must add that we should not put too much pressure on Ms. Harris if she wins the elections about her Indian origins and roots, because I think
Why do you say that, Ambassador?
India first. She would have to stand for US first. Sorry?
Why do you say that we should not focus too much on her Indian identity or origin?
Right. Because we have to recognize that while her mother, who she's very deeply attached to, was Indian, and she carries several traits of being an Indian, and she's very proud of the fact as well, as she is of her father and her Jamaican heritage. When you put pressure on a person of the so-called diaspora and expect things to happen in a certain way, we have to understand that she would represent America first. And I think that's one of the things that she mentioned in a broader context, not in the context of India, but in a broader context, how she would put America first. And I think that is the responsibility and that is the allegiance that she has undertaken as an American. And I think we have to respect that. But I think quite apart from that, even once we do that, there is so much of congruence between India and the United States today. I'm sure whoever comes, we would have a wonderful relationship going ahead.
All right, on that note, may I thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts and insights with our